In the beginning, the skies above were not realms of the birds, nor merely the expanse that held the clouds aloft, but the dominion of dragons. These magnificent creatures, with scales that shimmered like jewels under the sun, and wings that could embrace whole villages in their shadow, were as varied as the land over which they soared. From the towering ice drakes of the northern wastes to the sleek ember serpents winding through the desert sands, each species adapted beautifully to its realm. Humans, small and short-lived compared to these ageless beings, revered the dragons. They saw not beasts or gods, but the very forces of nature personified: fire, wind, water, and stone living and breathing before their eyes. This reverence was not born of fear, but of awe and a deep-seated recognition of the dragon's integral role in the balance of the world. In return, dragons, with their ancient wisdom, guided humanity, nurturing their growth from scattered tribes to flourishing civilizations. The Pact of Fire and Stone, as it came to be known, was no formal treaty laid on parchment, but a mutual understanding woven into the very fabric of existence. Dragons shared the secrets of the earth and skies: how to harness the winds, to warm their homes with fire without fear, to draw bounty from the earth, and to find purity in water. Societies thrived under the wings of their dragon benefactors, achieving feats of magic and engineering that seemed to defy the limitations of mortal hands. But as with all tales of harmony, this was merely the dawn of an age where actions began their long and intricate dance with consequences. Each flight a dragon took, each lesson they imparted, subtly wove the threads of change through the tapestry of the world. Little did they know, these threads would one day entangle both dragon and human alike in a struggle that would reshape the very fabric they had so carefully crafted together. As the years passed, the Pact of Fire and Stone transitioned from a simple coexistence to a profound collaboration. The dragons, with their lifespans that spanned centuries, served not only as protectors, but as custodians of knowledge and history. They remembered the world's shifts and shared these memories with their human allies, ensuring that the lessons of the past were not forgotten, but built upon. Human civilizations, under the tutelage of these ancient beings, reached new heights. Architectural wonders crafted with the strength of earth dragons graced city skylines, spires reaching toward the skies as if in homage to their winged mentors. Water dragons taught humans to navigate and harness the rivers and seas, which led to an era of exploration and cultural exchange that enriched societies like never before. The bond between humans and dragons also gave rise to the Dragonlords, a revered group of leaders chosen not by birthright, but by merit and the depth of their bond with their dragon counterparts. These Dragonlords acted as mediators and leaders. Their authority derived from their ability to commune with dragons and interpret their wisdom. They wore insignias crafted from dragon scales and gemstones, symbols of their service to the pact and the harmony it represented. Agriculture flourished with dragon-made irrigation systems, and forests were managed sustainably with the guidance of wood dragons, who understood the rhythms of growth and decay better than any human could. The cities became centers of learning and magic, where young scholars and mages aspired to study the ancient arts taught by the dragons. But prosperity does not quell the human heart's yearning for more power, more land, more knowledge. As the dragon-taught cities grew, so did their appetites, and with them, quiet stirrings of discontent. The Dragonlords, wise as they were, began to see signs of envy and ambition among those they ruled, emotions that could not be sated by shared prosperity alone. Thus, the seeds of discord were sown subtly at first, in hushed whispers and behind closed doors. It was the dawn of an era where the actions of a few would begin to challenge the balance of the many, setting the stage for conflicts that would ripple through generations. In the zenith of this golden age, the Dragonlords stood as pillars of the world's equilibrium. Chosen for their extraordinary empathy and intellect, these individuals could commune with dragons in a manner no other could. This rare ability allowed them not only to speak with dragons, but to understand their perspectives, blending human ambition with draconic wisdom. Each Dragonlord was paired with a dragon, forming a bond that transcended species. A union celebrated both as a pinnacle of cooperation and a powerful symbol of the Pact's success. The Dragonlords' councils, held in the great dragon halls, were spectacles of grandeur and diplomacy, The halls, built with stones that glowed with the dragon's inherent magic, echoed with debates and decisions that shaped the course of civilizations. They implemented systems of governance that promoted fairness and growth, adjudicating disputes that ranged from territorial conflicts to trade disagreements. Under their guidance, the arts flourished as never before. Literature, music, and visual arts were infused with the mystique of dragons. Poets wrote odes to the sky serpents, painters depicted the majesty of dragon flights against sunsets, and sculptors crafted statues so lifelike they seemed about to take flight. Yet the Dragon Lords were more than just rulers. They were also defenders. When threats loomed, whether from marauding beasts or human insurgents, the Dragon Lords and their dragons took to the skies in awe-inspiring displays of unity and strength. Their presence reassured the people and deterred many who might wish to disturb the peace. Despite their roles as leaders and protectors, the Dragon Lords were also scholars. They founded academies where knowledge of magic and science was imparted not just to the elite, but to any who showed promise. These institutions became beacons of learning, drawing inquisitive minds from far and wide. However, the very visibility and influence of the Dragon Lords began to stir unease among those who envied their power. While many celebrated the peace and prosperity, others, especially those with power of their own, began to covet the strength and immortality of the dragons. This envy, initially faint and isolated, gradually coalesced into a darker undercurrent, challenging the bedrock of society the Dragon Lords worked so hard to protect. As the centuries wore on, the embers of discontent smoldered beneath the facade of a utopia. The proliferation of technology and philosophical inquiry began to challenge the old beliefs and the very need for dragons and dragon lords. New thinkers posited that humans could surpass dragons in wisdom and power through science and innovation, fostering a burgeoning sense of human exceptionalism. In the heartlands of innovation, engineers and alchemists unveiled machines and concoctions that mimicked dragon-gifted abilities. From mechanical wings that emulated dragon flight to alchemical mixtures that produced fire or healed wounds, these inventions were celebrated as triumphs of human ingenuity. The creators became heroes in their own right, their names known and revered much like the Dragon Lords of old. This shift was not sudden, but gradual, a creeping revolution that wove through the fabric of society. The traditional reverence for dragons began to erode, replaced by a pride in human achievements. Statues of dragons in city centers, once kissed by the morning light, now stood in the shadows of towering inventors' monuments. The Dragon Lords, sensitive to the shifts in human hearts, convened in whispered urgency. They debated the implications of these new technologies and philosophies, torn between their roles as protectors of both humans and dragons. Some advocated for embracing change, integrating new ideas with ancient wisdom. Others viewed these developments as a threat to the balance they had sworn to uphold. Meanwhile, political leaders who had long chafed under the moral and judicial oversight of the Dragon Lords saw an opportunity. They began to forge alliances with the innovators, offering patronage in exchange for inventions that could bolster their own power bases. These alliances sowed the seeds of a new societal structure, one that valued power over partnership. The first overt signs of discord appeared in isolated incidents. Scholars ridiculed for their old-fashioned allegiance to dragons, minor nobles openly criticizing the Dragon Lord's decisions, and rogue inventors whose creations flouted ethical boundaries set by dragon-led councils. As these tensions simmered, the narrative of dragonkind shifted subtly in the annals of history, from guardians of humanity to relics of a bygone era, unnecessary and perhaps even obstructive to the new age of human ascendancy. The subtle rifts and ideological divides eventually coalesced into open conflict, a period that would later be mourned as the War of Ashes. It began not with a dramatic declaration, but as a series of skirmishes and political maneuvers that escalated into widespread rebellion. The catalyst was the assassination of a beloved Dragon Lord, rumored to have been orchestrated by a coalition of human rulers and radical innovators seeking to seize power. The dragons, once distant overseers, were drawn directly into human conflicts. As guardians, they had no choice but to defend the Dragon Lords and the principles of the Pact. Battles erupted across landscapes that had not seen bloodshed for centuries. The skies, once filled with the graceful flights of dragons, now darkened with smoke and the clamor of war. Dragons and humans fought side by side against the rebels, but the conflict was uneven. The rebels had developed weapons designed specifically to counter dragon abilities, spears that could pierce the toughest scales, and dark alchemical concoctions that clouded dragon senses. Each battle saw great losses on both sides, deepening the chasm between the two species. The war stretched over decades, with neither side able to claim decisive victory. Cities that had once been marvels of dragon-human cooperation now lay in ruins. Their spires crumbled and streets abandoned. The landscape was scarred, and so too were the hearts of all involved. As the war dragged on, the very nature of the conflict began to change. What had started as a power struggle morphed into a war of survival. The dragons, realizing the depth of human betrayal, began to withdraw their support, focusing on protecting their own kind. This retreat marked a turning point in the war, signaling to many that the Age of Dragons was truly ending. Humanity's dependence on dragons turned to resentment and fear. Propaganda painted dragons as the enemies of progress, beings that needed to be controlled or eradicated for humans to truly be free. This narrative took root, spreading even to regions that had once lived in harmony with their dragon guardians. The final battle of the War of Ashes was as tragic as it was decisive. A last, desperate assault by the dragons against the main stronghold of the rebels resulted in catastrophic losses. The great dragon Melitharix, the oldest and wisest of the dragons, fell in this battle, symbolizing the end of an era. In the aftermath, the world was left fractured and grieving. The dragons, once symbols of nature's majesty and partners in humanity's growth, were now few and hidden, lurking in the shadows of the world they helped build. The Dragonlords were disbanded, their halls left to echo with the ghosts of past glories. The aftermath of the War of Ashes was a world unrecognizable from the one that had flourished under the aegis of dragons and dragonlords. The dragons, now seen as relics of a defeated era, retreated into the farthest reaches of the world, into deep caverns and high mountain eyries, places untouched by human hands. Their departure marked the end of an epoch, the closing of a grand chapter in the annals of the world's history. As the dragons vanished, so too did the magic that had imbued the world with wonder and vitality. The once lush landscapes that dragons had tended withered, turning into barren fields and desolate wastes. The great rivers and lakes, once teeming with life sustained by the careful guidance of water dragons, began to stagnate or dry up. The world, deprived of its guardians, seemed to mourn. Human societies, left to their own devices, faced the daunting task of rebuilding. Without the wisdom and power of the dragons, they turned to technology to fill the void. Cities were rebuilt, not with the magical stonework of earth dragons, but with cold iron and smoke-belching factories. The skies, once the realm of dragons, now bore the trails of steam-powered airships and the distant echo of industrial clamor. The loss of dragons also led to a cultural void. Art and literature, which had once celebrated the mystical and the magical, grew darker and more introspective, reflecting the collective trauma of the war. The legends of dragons, once told with reverence and longing, transformed into cautionary tales of hubris and loss. In this new age, the Dragon Lords were remembered not as the wise rulers they had been, but as symbols of an old world that had resisted change. Their halls, once vibrant with the discourse of peace and cooperation, stood empty, preserved as museums to a bygone era or repurposed for more pragmatic uses. Yet, not all was lost to despair. In hidden corners of the world, a few old scholars and dragon sympathizers kept the truth alive. They preserved the old books and artifacts, passing down secret knowledge and keeping the hope of reconciliation alive. They believed that one day the dragons might return, not as rulers but as equals, to heal a world that had grown colder in their absence. Amid these fragmented societies, stories began to surface. Rumors of dragon sightings, whispers of hidden eggs, and tales of a lone figure seen conversing with shadows in the deep forests. These stories, dismissed by many as fantasies, kept a flicker of the old magic alive in the hearts of the hopeful. In the decades following the dragon's retreat, the world settled into a new rhythm, one marked by human ingenuity and the absence of magic. The landscape, once a vivid tapestry of lush greens and vibrant blues maintained by the dragons, had faded to more muted tones. Yet humans adapted, as they always do, harnessing steam and steel to forge ahead. The cities, rebuilt from the ashes of war, rose stark and imposing against the skyline, monuments to human resilience and determination. These new metropolises were powered by coal and oil, their streets lit by gas lights, a stark contrast to the enchanted lights that once glowed softly in every home. The air buzzed not with magic, but with the electrical currents of innovation, driving the engines of progress. In this new era, a different kind of leader emerged, the industrial baron. These men and women amassed wealth and power not through mythical bonds or ancient wisdom, but through commerce and industry. They built factories that touched the clouds and railways that stretched across continents, binding the fractured world together with iron and steam. Education and scholarship took on new forms, focusing on engineering, natural sciences, and mechanics. Magic, once the cornerstone of academic pursuit, was relegated to the realm of the arcane and the obscure, studied only by those eccentric few who clung to the old ways. Yet not all was grim. The world thrived in different ways. New art movements emerged, capturing the raw, mechanical beauty of the industrial landscape. Music evolved, with composers finding new rhythms in the clatter and clang of machinery. Literature explored themes of human versus nature, progress versus tradition, reflecting the complex interplay of loss and advancement. But beneath the surface of this bustling progress lay a sense of loss, a collective nostalgia for a past filled with wonders now deemed impossible. It was in this atmosphere that the Forbidden Forest began to stir once again with whispers of the old magic. These forests, once the havens of dragons, had been avoided for generations, wrapped in fear and superstition. Adventurers and outcasts, driven by curiosity or desperation, began to venture into these woods, searching for remnants of the old world. They found ruins of ancient dragon temples and relics that hummed softly with residual magic. These discoveries, though few and often dismissed by the scientific community, suggested that the magic had not entirely vanished. It had merely retreated, waiting for the right moment to reemerge. And in the villages closest to these enigmatic forests, the oldest inhabitants spoke of a prophecy yet unfulfilled. A prophecy that hinted at the return of dragons in a time of great need, not as rulers, but as partners in a world rebalanced. This prophecy, though scoffed at by many, gave hope to those who believed that the world was still capable of marvels, that the age of dragons might yet see a new dawn. As the new world marched forward, cloaked in smoke and the clatter of industry, the Forbidden Forest remained a stark contrast, untouched and enveloped in silence. These vast woods, sprawling at the edges of human territories, were tangled with ancient magic and lore. Once the playgrounds of dragons and the cradle of old magics, they now stood as forbidden territories, shrouded in mystery and fear. The legends that persisted spoke of these forests as cursed places, where the ground still bore the scars of dragonfire and the air whispered with the spirits of the lost. Few dared to enter, and fewer still returned, often with tales that sounded more like fevered dreams, visions of shimmering scales beneath the canopy, or haunting roars that echoed through the fog-laden trees. Yet, for all the fear they inspired, the Forbidden Forests also held a magnetic allure for scholars, outcasts, and treasure hunters. They ventured into the depths, armed with ancient maps and tales passed down through generations, searching for any sign that the dragons had not merely fled, but left something behind. Within these dense woods, the ruins of dragon temples lay hidden beneath overgrowth. These structures, built in the height of the dragon-human alliance, were architectural marvels designed to honor the dragons and serve as centers of learning and magic. Now, they were but hollowed relics, their stones cold and their altars empty. However, it was in one such temple that an old scholar, known only as Mirren, discovered a series of frescoes that depicted not only the history of dragons, but prophesied their return. The frescoes showed the cycles of the world, ages of prosperity followed by decline, and suggested that the dragon's departure was not permanent, but a part of a natural rhythm, a waiting period before they would emerge once again in a time of great need. Mirren's findings, though documented meticulously, were met with skepticism in the academic community. The age was one of reason and science, where legends were considered the remnants of a superstitious past. Yet, these discoveries sparked a renewed interest in the old magic among a select few who believed that the world was still full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. In secret, these believers formed a society dedicated to preserving dragon lore and preparing for their prophesied return. They gathered in the shadows of the forbidden forests, sharing knowledge and uncovering the secrets of old magic that lingered like embers waiting to be rekindled. The forbidden forests thus became a symbol of the untamed and unknown, a reminder that not all of the world could be contained by human ambition. They stood as a challenge and a promise, holding the keys to a past long thought lost and a future that might yet be shaped by the return of those who had once soared above it all. The Society of Believers, known among its members as the Order of the Dragon's Heart, grew steadily despite the prevailing winds of skepticism that dominated the age. They were a diverse group, composed of historians, former adventurers, magicians who still practiced the arcane arts, and even some disillusioned scientists who sensed that not all truths could be measured or explained by their instruments. The Order's mission was to delve deeper into the mysteries that the Forbidden Forests held, and to safeguard any artifacts or knowledge that could lead to the dragon's return. Their gatherings, held under the canopy of ancient trees or within the hidden chambers of decrepit temples, became a sanctuary for those who yearned for a world that embraced magic and mystery as it once had. Mirren, the scholar who had first uncovered the frescoes, became a leading figure in the Order. Her extensive knowledge of dragon lore and her unwavering belief in the dragon's return inspired many. Under her guidance, the Order mapped the Forbidden Forests, marking safe paths and uncovering more ruins that the uninitiated would have overlooked. One night, during an equinox when ancient texts claimed the veil between the old world and the new was thinnest, the Order conducted a ceremony at the heart of the forest. They gathered around an ancient dragon altar, their hands linked, voices united in chants that had not been heard in centuries. As the moon reached its zenith, a remarkable event unfolded. The air shimmered with a spectral light, and for a moment the shadows cast by the trees seemed to stir with life. Though no dragon appeared, the energy released during the ceremony was palpable. It was enough to convince even the most skeptical members that the magic of dragons was not merely a relic of the past, but a dormant force, awaiting the right conditions to awaken. This event marked a turning point for the Order. Energized by the experience, they intensified their efforts, translating old texts and experimenting with ancient rituals that had been dismissed as mere folklore. Their activities, however, did not go unnoticed. Rumors of their experiments began to spread, eventually catching the attention of the industrial barons, who viewed such pursuits as threats to the current order. A resurgence of dragon magic could undermine the industrial and scientific achievements that now defined the world. The tension between the old ways and the new came to a head when agents of the industrial barons, cloaked in the guise of government officials, raided an Order meeting. Many artifacts were confiscated, and several members were arrested, charged with disrupting the public order and engaging in superstitious practices. This crackdown forced the Order underground, turning their quest into a clandestine resistance. They moved their meetings to more remote locations, communicated through coded messages, and hid their most precious artifacts. Despite these challenges, the Order's resolve only hardened. They knew that their actions stirred the ancient powers, inching ever closer to a world where dragons might soar the skies once more. The Order of the Dragon's Heart, now a clandestine network, continued their work under the increasing pressure of industrial espionage and governmental crackdowns. Their operations were shadowy, infused with a sense of urgency and the thrill of forbidden knowledge. They had become guardians of a hidden truth, a flame kept alive in the darkness of a world that had turned its back on magic. In the deep recesses of the Forbidden Forests, away from prying eyes, the Order discovered an ancient dragon's nest, one that had been obscured by enchantments and the overgrowth of centuries. Inside, to their awe and wonder, lay a clutch of dragon eggs, preserved in a state of suspended animation, their shells shimmering with faint, arcane energies. This discovery was monumental, a direct link to the dragons of old, and a potential catalyst for their return. The Order, realizing the significance, rallied around the nest. They combined their efforts, pooling their knowledge of ancient magics and the environmental sciences to recreate the conditions needed for the eggs to thrive. As the seasons changed, the Order observed the eggs with bated breath. Slowly, the energies around the nest grew stronger, the air thrumming with the latent power of life yet to unfold. Then, on the night of a lunar eclipse, an astronomical event revered in dragon lore as a harbinger of renewal, the impossible happened. The eggs began to crack, one by one, as if responding to the celestial alignment. From the fractures, the first dragon hatchlings to be seen in centuries emerged, their eyes alight with the fire of their ancestors. Their scales glittered with a spectrum of colors that no human art could replicate, and their cries pierced the night air with a promise of a new beginning. The re-emergence of the dragons was not unnoticed. The vibrations of their awakening were felt across the lands, stirring the hearts of those who had dreamt of their return, and alarming those who had built their fortunes on the dragon's absence. The industrial barons, realizing the threat to their power, prepared for a confrontation. They marshaled their resources, developing technologies to counter the dragon's might. What they could not anticipate, however, was the public's reaction. The news of the dragon's return ignited a widespread renaissance of old beliefs and a questioning of industrial dominance. Conflicts arose, not just of military might, but of ideology. Debates raged in public forums and private meetings about the role of magic and technology in the world. As the young dragons grew, their presence inspired a movement, a call for a return to harmony with the natural world, a rebalance of the scales between the old ways and the new. The Order of the Dragon's Heart, once forced into the shadows, emerged as leaders of this movement. They advocated for a world where technology and magic could coexist, where dragons and humans could share the skies and the lands as they had in the legendary past. The story of dragons, thus, is not one of mere myth or obsolescence, but of cycles, of endings and beginnings, of falls and rebirths. The world, ever-changing, stands at the brink of a new era, where the ancient and the modern merge to create something entirely unprecedented.